Story 1. This happened to me when I was around 12 years old. Me and my family lived in a small apartment, but it felt cozy to me. And we knew some of our neighbors, and would sometimes even invite them to our house. They were great people at the time. I used to sleep next to my brother's bed and felt safe with his presence, like nothing bad would happen to me. The only thing I can say was bad about the apartment was that our bedroom was next to the bedroom of our neighbor, which was a little higher than ours. If you wanted to see their room, you could do so by getting on top of a chair, while they could almost see our entire bedroom with no effort, despite it being freaky. I didn't think much about it, since, like I said, I had my brother sleeping in the same room and felt like nothing could go wrong. Oh, how innocent the first was the day everything started. I'd barely finished my dinner and decided that I would go to sleep early, so my brother was not in the room at the moment. Everything seemed fine until I woke up and saw something that still gives me chills to this day. What I saw was a silhouette of a person right next to the window, and while I could not see their face at all, I knew they were staring at me. I remember screaming as loud as I could and running desperately to the living room where my mom was watching TV. I explained what happened to her, and she didn't seem bothered at all. She was like, "Oh, okay," and continued watching TV like nothing happened. A few days after that event, I was feeling way better about it, but even then I decided to keep the curtains closed just in case, until one day I woke up in the middle of the night and for some reason had the idea of opening the curtains, and as you already expected, she was there staring at me once again, and like the first time, I couldn't see her face at all, just a black figure. I don't know how many times she did that, but for the following days I would wake up like 2 to 3 times every night, and while the curtains were always closed, I would have this feeling that she was there watching me sleep. A few days later, I decided to tell my parents everything, and that's when things get creepier. They said that right next to our apartment lived an elderly woman who was sick and had her son taking care of her. They said that they would leave to take out the trash, and she would sneak behind them and smile while patiently waiting for them to turn around. I tried telling them how I felt paranoid. She was always watching me, and they said something like, "She's a sick old lady scaring people is probably the only highlight of her week. Just ignore her and keep sleeping." Well, nowadays I don't care much about that. I remember being very angry with them. Why weren't they helping me? I did exactly as they said and just ignored her every night while keeping the curtains closed. It took some time, but I was finally starting to forget about the experience, until a few weeks later. That's when things took a turn for the worse from my mother's perspective. Our family is always different from others. My mom was the one working all day while my dad would be at home with us, so he would always bring me and my brother to school and then go pick us up when it ended. One day I was at school waiting for my dad to arrive when a friend came up to me and said her dad could take me home. I completely forgot my father was coming to get me, so I said yes and got into her car. When I got back home, I knocked at the door, but other than my 2 dogs barked working, there was no response. I started to get anxious, so I kept knocking over and over until I heard a big sound coming from the old woman's apartment, and that's when I realized I made a big mistake. As soon as I heard the sound, I ran to the elevator and clicked the button as many times as I could. Our elevator had a window at the center, so I was terrified she would show up in it, but thankfully she didn't. After I exited the building, I decided to lay down on the street, trying to process what had happened. When my friend saw me and invited me to their house, I was watching cartoons while her dad was calling mine, explaining why I was not at school. When my dad came back, I ran to him and gave him a big hug while crying, and he said it's okay now. My brother's class usually ended 30 minutes after mine, so we had to go back to the school and get him the entire time. I was expecting my father to scold me, but instead he was very calm and told me he was thinking about buying a cell phone so I could message him if anything happened. After that experience, I was even more terrified of the old woman, but I kept the curtains closed like usual. I kind of got used to it. Eventually we moved to a different house, and I never saw that woman again. Not that I would be able to recognize her, since every time I saw her at the window, her face was completely shadowed, and that's how my story ends. Thankfully, I didn't get to see what she looked like, but I realize my story is not as interesting as some others I've read. In any case, I hope you enjoyed Story 2. To preface, I live in a con town with 6 other young girls in our 20s. The city we live in is not that nice and has a huge homeless and drug problem where break-ins are not unusual. However, what happened last Saturday was definitely strange. My Roommates and I, as well as some of our boyfriends, were hanging out and drinking in our house while two of the girls opted to go out to a bar. By around 1 a.m., the two girls came home from the bar and everyone was tired, so we all went to our own respective rooms later. In the night, I was awoken by someone opening my door and standing in my room. Staring at me. In my head, I thought it was one of my roommate's boyfriends. Trying to see if my boyfriend and I were still awake to continue to party. Since I was tired, I pretended to be asleep to avoid being bucked. After a bit, the person closes my door and proceeds to pace back and forth in the hallway. They then begin to attempt to open my roommate's door, whose room is right next to mine. Luckily, her door was locked, and she also had her boyfriend with her. The person then proceeds to go into our utensil drawer and grabs a knife to attempt to pick her lock. After gaining some courage, her boyfriend shouts, "Who the is that?" which startles the man, who then sprints up the stairs and out the door. The police were called and did a search and obviously didn't find anything. They told us break-ins were normal, which we knew. However, what makes this whole scenario creepier is that he didn't steal anything. My phone, alcohol, and $600 shoes were untouched. We also suspect that this person was not on drugs or alcohol, as he moved very quietly and deliberately. He was able to get in because the two girls who came home from the bar did not lock the door behind them. I'm not sure what this man's intent was, but I am forever grateful that I happened to have my boyfriend with me and pretended to be asleep. It gives me chills thinking that a strange man was in my room and what could have happened to me if I was. Story 3. Alone. When I was in my early 20s, I moved to Southern California with my aunt. Once I had a job established in steady income, one found an apartment that was really affordable at $350 a month plus utilities. That's the first red flag, because California is not cheap. The other residents in the apartment were a 45 male named Zach and a 45-year-old female named Tina. They weren't a couple. Tina was a little difficult to deal with. But this story is about Zach and his friend Mike. Mike and Zach were childhood friends, and Mike lived in the same apartment complex as us, so he was over a lot. Every time I would come home from work, they would be polishing off a handle of vodka and then would go out. I didn't really think much of this other than, "Damn little lady, you sure can put it away." I wasn't really comfortable in the living situation, but it was cheap. I was in school and I tried to make the best of it. I got along with Zach for the most part if it was just him around, but Mike was just a time bomb. Here are just a few instances that gradually got worse over time. The first incident, Zach invited me out with Mike and another friend of theirs out to a local bar a couple of miles away. I was comfortable around Zach and I got into the passenger side of his truck. I didn't have any negative interactions with anyone until this point. Mike went ballistic in our complex parking lot about how I was selfish and had no business in the front seat because I wasn't Zach's girlfriend and whatnot. It was weird because a man the same age as my dad was throwing a tantrum over the passenger seat, so I just got out and went back to my apartment. My first rent check bounced. I apologized to Zach and discovered that my checks had misprinted the account number. I paid in cash and paid off the bounce check fee and thought all was okay until I got home one evening and Mike was over as normal but starts interrogating me on why I couldn't pay my rent. I was only 22 at the time and didn't really want an issue, so I was just like, "Hey." I apologized and took care of it. Even though Mike didn't live in the apartment, he would not let this go. He would just scream at me saying I was lazy, that I should be evicted, and on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus came out around this time, and Mike got the phone. He told me he would let me look at it if I went down on him. It was just uncomfortable and awkward. What do you even say to that when this guy's always trying to scream at you? We weren't friends and never really had a good interaction together, so I just kind of did finger guns and was like, "You got me, huh?" and went into my room. It's also important to note that Mike and Zach both had 2 DUIs. Zach was a school teacher and ended up being let go because of the DUIs. However, both men continued to drink excessively all of the time. I also had to have a key made for the lock on my bedroom door because it would get violent a lot, and that was my safety net. A lot of other instances happened, but this one takes the cake and is the point to the story. Zach and Mike had gone out and took an Uber to whatever local bar. I'd gotten home and went straight to my room. As always, I hear the front door swing open and Mike was pissed drunk, screaming his head off about how he lost his new iPhone. This guy starts beating on my bedroom door, demanding to be let in because he knew I had his phone. I cracked my door open, and he'd stepped away from the door with his fists balled up like he was going to hit me. I told him I didn't have the phone. Mike circles back to the one time that my rent check bounced, and obviously I need money. He demands that he come into my room and tear my room apart looking for said phone. I told him absolutely not, and shut and locked the door. Mike started banging on my door and trying to unlock it, threatening my life, saying he was going to assault me so I can get what I deserve for being a thief. Lots of other gross and scary things. I was told if I called the police that he would beat me to a bloody pulp. This was especially scary because my aunt was my only family nearby, and she wasn't really helpful. She just told me to be an adult and deal with it. Other than that, I didn't really have a support system. I told Zach a couple of days later that I would be moving out immediately and would not be paying rent for that month. Then out of Zach's dark bedroom, Mike pops out with this creepy, sinister smile, saying bye, almost taunting. I hurried into my room and locked the door. I could hear Zach blaming Mike for me moving out, and Mike continued to just call me names and asking how I had the money to move out. The iPhone was found for anyone who's curious. It had fallen out of his pocket in the Uber he was in, but obviously the first step to finding the iPhone was to flip the out on me versus calling the Uber driver. This was almost a decade ago, and I don't know what happened to that pair, but I wish them nothing but the worst. One day while I was hiking in the Black Forest in Germany, I was on the way back to the house I was staying at after I misjudged the time and had to walk back the last kilometers in the dark. Let's say the Black Forest has its name for a reason. Even in the day it can be hard to see, but after the sun went down you can't see, so I was trying to follow the road and not accidentally run off a cliff when I suddenly get the feeling of being watched. As I said, I can't see anything, and it's also in the middle of the forest behind the last mountain, so there really can't be anyone there. Anyway, I continue walking while keeping an eye out for anything suspicious, or at least trying. This continues until the road makes a sharp turn, and after going the new direction for a few meters, I notice a very strong smell. I smoke, and my sense of smell isn't great, but it still hit me pretty strong. I guessed that it had to be a boar with her younglings, so I get even more nervous. But I had a few encounters with some before, so I wasn't too concerned, but I still have the feeling that something with the smell and the silence was off. Boars are loud, so normally you can hear them way before you smell them. Anyway, I continued and reached the house. I didn't think too much of it until the next morning I hear on the radio that in exactly the area I was going through, an unusually aggressive wolf was seen by multiple people. I feel lucky these encounters all occurred in public places. For reference, I'm a female in 24, I have freckles and naturally red hair, and I'm about 5 feet 7 inches. The first time this man approached me was while I was in a popular downtown bar with my best friend. I saw this man approach, and I was not interested, so as to not lead him on, I only kept my responses short. The conversation went as follows. His intro line was, "You have so many freckles there in such random places. That's how freckles work. That is how you know you're a real redhead." I'm well aware. He lingered to ask a couple more pointless questions until my friend and I managed to get away. My friend and I ended up going to a different bar across the street. A little later in the night, we'd settled into the new bar and were a little drunker, and my friend went to the bathroom, leaving me at a high-top table up against the wall. The same man appeared out of nowhere to my left and put one arm against my table and the other against the wall, so I had nowhere to go, saying to me, "You're the redhead from before." I was extremely uncomfortable, but I figured my friend would be back soon and would be able to help me out of the situation without causing a scene. He asked me several awkward questions. Meanwhile, I had secretly texted my friend to hurry back to save me from a creepy guy. He then asks take a picture with me. Why, I reply, for the memories. I was still trapped, and I was hoping if I complied he would leave me alone, so I let him take a picture of us while I was smiling a fake hostage smile. My friend had reappeared but was standing by the bar and not approaching the table. I pretended to be drunker than I was and rushed over to her, gushing, "Oh my God, you're back, let's go dance," and I dragged her away to explain the situation. Fast forward a week, my next encounter with this man was at a completely different and very busy bar with different female friends of mine. I was having a good time, and suddenly I looked to my left, and this man was, I kid you not, running in my direction, phone outstretched with the picture he forced me to take with him on screen. I'd had enough, and I was done being polite to save his feelings as I Sat there scared. I told him, leave me alone, you creep me out. He venomously replies, well, you're an ugly. Anyways, my friends catch wind something is going on, and as he walks away they offered to protect me if needed for months. I thought it was my last interaction with this man, and I was wrong. I taken it as a warning, an example of how men's demeanors can change once they've been rejected, and it was chilling. 7 months later I had forgotten about the prior encounters, and I was casually browsing a drugstore makeup display at night after the gym. I was looking down at a product when my spidey senses started going off. Someone was standing on the other side of the display and staring at me in my periphery. I look up, and a man was 2 feet in front of me. I did not yet realize it, but it was the same man. He asked me if the drugstore we were in sold chapstick. It's a drugstore, everyone without fail sells chapstick. Taken aback, my initial thought was that he assumed I was an employee, and I replied, I don't work here. He smiled a slow smile, maintained eye contact, and said, okay. We both continued shopping until he returned to another makeup aisle I was at in the store. He said, I think I've met you before. When I told him I didn't believe we had, as I truly didn't remember him. Yet he began to ask me questions that every girl my age in my city would answer yes to. Have you been downtown before? Well, yeah, everyone has, but like every weekend, not every single weekend. No, but last summer with girls. At this point I was getting a very bad feeling in my stomach. Everything about his body language, demeanor, and the things he was saying felt off, and he was staring. He insisted 2 more times we had met and would not let it go, so I suggested, lots of people confuse me with the redheads they've met before. I'm sorry, I don't remember meeting you. He stared at me, and after a moment slowly said, no, I know the redhead I spoke to. I began walking to the register, and he followed as I walked. It finally clicked who it was, and I was afraid his social unawareness and weird questions made me sure it was him. I played it off cool until I paid for my items. I was leaving the store. I didn't look back, but I knew he had items to pay for before he could follow, so as soon as I was out of the door I sprinted for my car. I got in, locked it, and sat for a moment stunned as I processed what had happened. I came to my senses quickly, and I drove to the parking lot exit. I looked back, and he was just outside the doors of the pharmacy, his head looking back and forth across the dark parking lot for me. I know he saw my car leaving the parking lot, and since it was at night few people were at the pharmacy, so it was clearly me leaving. I took note of the car he was walking to, and I decided to take an extra long route home to ensure I wasn't being followed. This route led through a wealthy neighborhood at the far east of my city, so there's nothing in the way. Aside from high-end homes, I looped through a roundabout in this neighborhood, and I saw a car matching his drive straight through. There was no way to know if it was his, however, it was chilling. There was no sign of his car after that. A couple weekends later was my final encounter. It was St. Patrick's Day, and the bars downtown were packed as I've ever seen them. I was in the same bar he had first approached me in months before. Alone, as I was waiting for friends to get through security, he rushed up to me from the crowd. He said, hey, I know you from CVS. I had to assertively tell him to leave me alone. Multiple times he kept asking, why do you have a boyfriend? I responded again, saying, none of your business, leave me alone. It is interesting how so many men only seem to take another man's claim to a woman as I know, and not a woman's obvious and direct disinterest. To this day, another 7 months later, that was the last I saw of him. I'm lucky these encounters were in public. They could have easily have turned violent otherwise. I wrote this hoping to show other women being assertive and at times rude is completely okay and necessary to protect yourself. Some men do not take no for an answer easily. To this day, it baffles me why he would try so hard to make me remember him after he called me an ugly. Anyway, stay vigilant, ladies. In late summer in 2019, I'd say maybe a couple of miles away from Montello, I was walking down in the woods in Marquette County, Wisconsin. I decided to go in the night after dark because there would be no heat and I didn't want to get heat stroke out there. Story 4. I was taking a walk on a foot trail some people used and made, but it's not an actual trail on any maps anyways. Moments before the experience happened, I checked my phone and it was 1:42 a.m. A couple of minutes later, I hear a hey bro, can you help me from a direction I was facing. I said with what come closer, they said, which made me choose to run back down the way I came, and yes, I got chased down and I heard I need some help bro. Funnily enough, a deputy was driving by as I floored out of there as the guy hit my Car with a knife, he scratched my truck a bit and dented it. This happened in September. No, the deputy did not do anything, as I don't think they really cared. Story 7. This happened a few years back. I was 23 years old, married, and had a stepdaughter. I'm female, divorced from my ex now, and do not see my stepdaughter anymore, but at this time I was living with them, my cousin, her husband, and their son. We had a townhouse on a dead end that led to some train tracks in my hometown. The neighborhood was decent, but had a lot of houses close together and was highly populated with children. There were usually toys, bikes, and skateboards hanging around on the sidewalk and on the front lawns of houses. This included our house. We resided on the second and third floor of the house, while our landlord's daughter occupied the first floor. Shortly after moving in, two tenants moved into the basement apartment, a middle-aged couple. They seemed all right, but were eerily quiet. At first they started showing signs of drug use and started showing some odd behavior. For example, they would scream to the top of their lungs at each other over petty things like wanting a ride somewhere and not being able to give that ride. They were starting to scare our kids. I had a bad feeling about the guy. John, in our state, we have access to criminal records. We can search anybody's state police poly record. I exercised that right and found out that this guy had a pending sexual assault charge against a child under 12. Now I was terrified, scared of the kids playing outside, scared of the kids being in the same building as this guy. Weird things started happening, like we would wake up in the morning and the kids' toys would be broken, not just broken but destroyed. Skateboards would be completely broken, BRN in half. A wagon was completely mangled and toys were thrown down an embankment we had behind our house. We all had a feeling it was him, but we couldn't prove it. One day the hit the fan tension had already started to build. It was clear we didn't like each other, but everyone was so passive-aggressive about everything. Until this day, I was dropping my ex off at work while my cousin kept an eye on the kids while they played at the neighbor's house in their fenced-in yard. My phone rang when I was a few blocks away from home. It was my cousin. I remember her saying, "I think we're going to have a problem." I asked her why, and she said, "John is throwing down the embankment and knocking over the garbage bins." My first thought was, those things are full, he must be making a mess, and boy was I right. I pulled into my driveway to see all of our recyclables scattered across the edge of the driveway. It made my blood boil. I got out of the car and looked over at his door on the side of the house. I saw him throw something out of the doorway and we met eyes, and as soon as that happened, I took that chance to confront him. I yelled over to him, "What's the problem? Why are you throwing all over the place?" He didn't take a minute. He literally started charging at me, saying, "What the are you going to do about it?" When he made it up to me and was just about to put his hands on me, I punched this 6 feet 5 inches man in the face. It didn't exactly drop him, but it knocked him down. He fell back and kind of bumped into his van and fell on his ass in front of it. To put things into perspective, I'm 5 feet 8 inches, and at the time I had some extra weight on me, so I wasn't a tiny little helpless girl. After this, he got up with a vengeance. He threw punch after punch after punch. So did I. I was starting to get weak. My arms felt like spaghetti, and I couldn't see a thing. I could hear my stepdaughter screaming and my cousin yelling for help from the upstairs window. I wiped my eyes, and to my surprise, I saw my other neighbors restraining Joe, and he was still trying to attack me. Even being restrained, I was bleeding badly. I didn't realize it right away, but my nose was broken. My 4-foot-10 cousin was standing in my front yard with a metal chair over her head, and my stepdaughter was taken inside with my other neighbor kids. John was screaming at me, telling me my bird shits in his house, even though my bird was 3 floors above him and didn't even on my floor. I was just screaming back at him, calling him crazy, a diddler, and telling him nobody wants him here. It felt like a segment of Jerry Springer. I ran upstairs to look for my cousin's husband, and he was in the window calling the police. When I realized he was useless, I headed back out. John was gone. He took off the rescue, and police arrived, where I was questioned, then taken to the hospital. I was released soon after and was about to head out to pick up my ex, who hadn't even known what had happened yet, but I couldn't find my keys, my car and house keys. We checked everywhere and couldn't find them. I started feeling like John stole them before he took off, but they were with my phone. Why wouldn't he have taken my phone? I called the police station, and they informed me he was picked up. I took a shot in the dark and asked if they found my keys on him. I described my keys, green New York Yankees bat, keychain, etc. They confirmed yes, he did have them. They asked me if I would like to press further charges. I, of course, said yes. There was a no Contact order active, but technically they could not make him leave the house. It was up to my landlord. Kicked them the out not before they could squeeze some stalking and harassing in my good neighbors turned. Their security cameras on facing our house. One morning his girlfriend was standing in front of our house yelling up at us all kinds of nasty. When we watched it on footage, what we couldn't see was that John was standing right at our door. She was the bait, he was the hook. Thank God we didn't bite. We caught him doing other creepy like him crawling around my car, not even doing anything, just crawling around the car like a cat or something weird. They moved out and it was peaceful for the rest of the time we were there. I still see them here and there. They're usually walking and usually looking angry. Good crazy neighbors. Let's not meet ever. Story 8. Again, it's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's perspective on it as well. She just doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I live in a mid-sized city in the southern United States where the main thing to do at the time was go to the mall. Sure, we had movie theaters and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that there really wasn't much to the city. My mom worked at the department store located in the mall, and having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out of the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in a food court. Honestly, though, I was shy and just preferred to stay cooped up in the break room playing video games on my Nintendo 3DS. My mom's coworkers were generally very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or just to check on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mom on weekends, I could usually convince my mom to pick up my friend to go along with us. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak a secret date in every now and then. My girlfriend, though, never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did, so I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her to just walk over to a nearby store and look around, or to go grab something from the food court rather than walking, but I noticed pretty quickly that she wasn't trying to actually get me to walk around. She just didn't want to be in the break room. Now, my girlfriend was more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambience of the break room for some reason for a little while I let it go, but eventually I got frustrated and asked directly what was really bothering her about the break room. I thought she was going to tell me that it was too cramped or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy. The things that bothered me about it too, but no, what she told me was that she heard things in the ceiling like someone was walking around in there. I had learned from my mother that there was a room in the ceiling, but it wasn't meant for walking around, it was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation, but technically someone could go up there. So I told my girlfriend this and said it was like an employee up there to fix stuff. She said that was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication, and though I got frustrated, I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling. My mom just looked distressed and said that they hadn't been up there fixing anything that day, but she wanted me to see something. My mom took me into the receiving room of the department store, which was just a room off in the back filled with boxes and random junk the store was going to put out for sale. The layout of this room, though, was sort of an L shape. One part of the L was used for receiving, but the other part was way into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb in there, as it would have been a safety hazard. The only thing that this particular area had was a hatch that led into the ceiling. That was it. So needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be claw marks leading up the wall to the hatch, but I still remember the way it looked, brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mom if it was a prank, but she told me that this wasn't the first time it had happened, and she had no way of knowing I would even ask about it. According to her, these weird carvings had showed up several times over the course of a few months. Each time the store would call in the mall security and maintenance teams, who would clean the wall up and then go into the ceiling to investigate. Nothing had ever come of their searches, though, and they Eventually gave up dealing with the marks. The only explanation mall security could give was that it was likely a homeless individual who had made their way into the ceiling by sheer willpower, and happened to be very good at hiding during the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mom after that, and any time I wanted my girlfriend to come over we found somewhere else to go. During the day sometimes she'd just come over to my house and we'd watch TV or whatever, but I didn't feel safe going back to the break room after that. I knew nothing had happened up until that point, but I just didn't want to risk it honestly, so to whoever was walking around in the ceiling at my mom's workplace, let's know not me. This happened on a trip a few years ago, one night midweek when the park is. Story 9. Usually quieter, I woke up having to use the bathroom at around 2 a.m. so I left the trailer to go to the comfort stations. The site was one of those corner sites, so there's a really short trail in the back of the site through the woods. Before you get to the lights where the washroom is, you can technically go around the front, but I figured I would just cut through there like I usually do to save time because I was tired. As I'm passing the middle of the trail, I hear a light noise that sounds like it's right beside my ear. It sounds like a giggling, so I picked up the pace a bit and started looking for a raccoon or porcupine or something, but I couldn't see anything or hear any twig cracking, which I thought was weird. No sign of a person out there either. As soon as the last thought crossed my mind, I swear to this day that I heard something deeper in the woods in a female voice say hello. To say I jumped was an understatement. I sprinted full throttle to the lights, tripped on a log, and ripped my pant leg and shin. I made it to the bathrooms alive, feeling painful and kind of stupid. Once I was at the comfort station, I did my business and talked myself out of it being anything unnatural like the good biologist that I am. I figured I must have just misheard a raccoon or something. I didn't really believe in the paranormal, so worst case it was an actual person. I didn't feel like getting jumped by some weirdo while I'm out at night by myself, so I made the decision to take the longer way back in the open road and skipped the shortcut as I passed by the entranceway for the woods. Again, I can only tell you what I heard, but I swear it's clear as day. I heard a whisper that said, "Come back." I think that's the fastest I've ever run in my life. I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't do camp bathrooms at night by myself anymore, but I can't explain what happened. Luckily, my family got a new trailer the following season with an indoor bathroom room, so it hasn't been an issue. Story 10. Since this happened recently, it was midnight. I was at the train station waiting for my train to arrive, and there was this really tall guy walking my way carrying a suitcase. As he came closer, I noticed he was struggling to carry the suitcase as it looked rather heavy, and oddly enough it was leaking some sort of liquid, not water, but it seemed thicker. As this guy approaches, he orders me to take the bag. The tone of his voice was a bit aggressive, and he didn't sound sober. Taking a closer look at him, I noticed he's covered in dirt up to his face and cuts on his forearm. I said, "Sorry." Struck for words, I started to walk away. My train starts to arrive, and the guy follows me saying things I couldn't quite understand. I hop on the train. The door shuts. He's outside pointing at me, yelling more chipperish. The train slowly departs, and he suddenly punches the window in frustration with his eyes locked on mine. I am relieved I'm on the train. Fellow commuters looked at me puzzled with all the commotion of me and that guy. It creeped me out. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I want to give a special mention to J Nightmares for sourcing and translating some of these stories from Japanese. Check out his channel for more stories you haven't heard before. I'll put the link to his channel in the description. If you have a scary story you would like me to read in an UPC coming video, this is one way to help me guarantee variety in the stories I share. You can email me or post it to my subreddit. I'll drop the details in the video description. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members who now have early access to Adri videos as well as other behind-the-scenes content. Thank you to Alexia Tuttle, Marshana Rainey, Woo Sayan, Mary Wright, Jessica Copperfield, Zoe D, Danielle Shaw, Jane Wiggins, Tara Harris, Mary R, Callie Townsend, M Deshawn Edmondson, Kimmy Love, Wendy Maris, Confessions of a Cleaner, Megan Abrams, Miss Tycoon, Stephen Sloan, Christina Myway, Ashley Bray, Tissa Felter, Danielle, Tina Marie Heckman, Amal Garner, Lisa Redford, Deborah Malakani, Sue T, Adwell, Diana Johnston, Vamp, Debs, Jasmine Davis, Erica, Air Fox, Mulder, Ram, Beltran, Tina, Nick Bosie, Sarah, CH, Neil, Kavanagh, Tiara Sanders, Timothy Stratton Jennifer Jenkins Lloyd Rash Mar Duna Michael M. Ollie Marissa. Kuro M. Hops King Slim Justin Beast Gillespie Joy Dana J. Bartolana. Stephanie McLaren Lumini Cami Skin Crawler Adara Bella Place 2006 Michelle. Welchman Dana B. Lisa McDonald Clary Scott Madison C. Wasp Sting Jennifer J. Ashley Liliat Lee T. Wyatt Gina Laura JK6. Venzio Donna Joey Big GSC Tanya. Spaghetti Waiolo King Matthew October Gypsy Lisa Ollie Thomas Build With Me. Letitia Fran Debs Insomnic Cats Stephanie Summer Rebecca. Tyara This Bad Kitty Your Papy Dilly Laney Tripping Balls Through History. Samantha Erica Alyssa Tracy Killians. Place April James R. Jen Joy. Handout Pegasus Genesis Karen Kitu V. Barry LJ Fiona Xbox Scott Pite Booty Monica. Level A Chris and Anna Holly Spry Kimber. Jasmine Centik Heather Haven Kitty Cat Luna 2. ADHD Aurora Janice Cinderella Baby Borderline Betty Lady Draco Erica Nicole. Snowball Raina Melanie The Honeybee 987. Pretty Girl 215 Ryan Brook Wendy CFTY K Tina Dina. Vampy Devs Patricia Amber Krista Brenda. Absent Alice Chrissy K Spiders Web H Law. And Andrea Sue Monique Shaw Gorman Emma. Lisa Sigma Cube X Greg Chelsea Amanda. Jane Sam Zep Tay Sar C Austin Tegan Lil. Smart Jenny Gabrielle Fire O Sarah P. James Garana Gemma Allen Monica Level A and Alex. I hope you're doing well, guys. I'll see you all on the next one.